Hey everybody, glad to be here with you today on Thursday for my live show. And today we're going to be talking about building custom interactive lessons in Nearpod. So thanks so much for joining me today. I know we're right up against the holiday break. So if you're here right before that, then I commend you for still learning right before you're about to go on break. That's awesome. Just so you know, we are going to be going on a 2 week break here. So I'll be back the week of January 4th. It's shaping up to be a pretty exciting few weeks after I get back. We are going to be doing a show with Apple Distinguished Educator Michael Hernandez. We're going to be talking about how we can use this moment in education to reimagine our practices for when we do eventually get out of the current situation that we're in. So I'm really excited to talk to him. And also going to be doing a show about running a successful EdTech pilot at your school, a show about using Hapara to streamline teacher-student workflow, increase visibility of what's going on in your G Suite program. So a lot of stuff that's coming up in January and beginning of February. That's really exciting. We also have planned on January 16th a workshop that I've been working on putting together behind the scenes with the good folks over at Marco Learning. A day-long workshop that we designed after a lot of discussion about basically all the big problems that we've been hearing consistently from teachers that we work with. So they work in the AP world, and they're always hearing very similar things that I'm hearing from teachers, and that's how do we increase discussion, participation in Zoom calls? How do we create more engaging lessons online? How do we streamline feedback for students when we have all these different tech programs that we're working in? How do we, there's a lot of things there. How do we build community, right? How do we do online science lab instruction? And so what we did is we put together a day-long workshop that basically addresses all of those questions. And so if you're interested in that, the link is in the video description. If you're on YouTube, if you're on some of the other channels, I'll drop that in. It's January 16th. So go check that out if you're interested in registering for that. Let's see, what else did I want to mention? Shows. I know I mentioned or we changed the time of the show to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm curious how that's working out for people. So if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat stream as well, if you're liking that new time. We were doing it at 6 p.m., but I was trying to make it more accommodating for people in different time zones. So let me know how that's working for you. I appreciate that feedback. And then lastly, if you are a teacher, if you are a school leader, you're looking for some additional support with a strategic technology integration plan, I'd love to talk with you about how I can help. There is a link to book a call with me in the video description below. All right, so let's jump into it and talk about Nearpod. So why am I talking about Nearpod right before the break? I was giving a lot of thought to what I should put together a show about right before we roll into break. And in some ways, maybe Nearpod is unexpected, but I really think that if you are struggling, as I know so many people are right now, with how to engage students, how to understand what students are doing on their computers when you are working online. This could be hybrid. It doesn't have to be fully online. And of course, it could apply to a fully online environment. But one of the central difficulties that people are facing is, how do I know what my students are doing? How do I know what they're doing on the other side of the screen? I'm tired of trying to pull teeth to get them to talk, unmute themselves in a Zoom conversation, or just participate in a Zoom chat. And so given that so many folks out there are still having that issue, which I totally understand, I think that implementing Nearpod is a great first step. It's not that I think you should only be using Nearpod. Obviously, there are lots of other programs that I like that I suggest out there. But if really engaging students is your issue and you're looking for just getting that visibility of student thinking out there, I would recommend you check out Nearpod. And specifically today, I'm going to look at the lesson builder that's inside of Nearpod. So I'd love to hear from people as well in the live stream here, whether or not you already use Nearpod if you've used the add-on, if you use some of the pre-made lessons, just to kind of see people's experience level and share also with other people out there about how you're using Nearpod. So what I'm going to show you here is a free account. It's actually an account that I just set up. So this is not a paid account. Nearpod has actually been changing their paid program quite a bit. So a while back, it used to be that you had to pay to access certain lessons within Nearpod, $2.99 for a lesson, and you could kind of pick and choose which lessons that you wanted. Then they switched to a system that is mostly in place now where basically it's a storage-based system. So I actually want to show you the pricing list here. So now you can pretty much get access to anything in Nearpod for free, but you would be limited with the amount of storage that you would have. And you're also limited with the amount of students that you can have per session. So you can see here up at the top for the free silver plan that if you only have 100 megabytes of storage, you can imagine you can't store that many lessons. So if you're planning to use Nearpod over the long term, you're planning to use it a lot, you're going to find that you're going to have to delete lessons if you want to keep using them. I would still recommend that you give it a try. You don't necessarily purchase anything until you're pretty certain you want to use it and you make use of the storage. But just know that that's the way it works now. And then one other thing that they just recently changed as well that some people might have noticed is that the Google Slides add-on is no longer part of the free plan. It used to be free. Now you do need this gold subscription to access the add-on. That's okay though. I know I've shown the add-on in some of my videos. It's an add-on that I really like. I've sold it as one of my top. In fact, I think I said it was the top free add-on, and definitely that was true. However, you can still use the lesson builder within Nearpod for free, and it's just as good, if not better in some ways. And I'm going to talk about why I think so in this show. So what I'm going to focus on again is the internal lesson builder in Nearpod that you can access here where it says My Lessons and you have the Create drop-down menu. Now, I do want to point out if you're relatively new to Nearpod that Nearpod does also have a library of content. I would highly suggest that you check it out. There's all kinds of great content integrations in Nearpod that are definitely worth looking at, pre-built lessons. So you don't necessarily have to build something on your own here. However, I know that we often have our own ways of doing things. We want to put together things in our own way, or we've already put things together in a certain sequence. And so we want to be able to emulate that within Nearpod. And sometimes we just want to be able to do our own thing. So these are great for modeling, but the lesson creator is what we're going to focus on today. So to build a lesson, what we're going to do here is go to the Create button, and we're going to go here to Lessons. Now, what I want to, I forgot to mention this in the beginning, that what we're going to do is I'm basically going to show all the different features very quickly that you can use. So there's content features and there's going to be activities features. I'll show how each of those works very briefly. And then what I'm also going to do is essentially build a whole lesson. I'll build a lesson in Nearpod following the 5 E's. And then at the end of the show, I've decided that I'm going to try to do a little Nearpod freestyle. So we'll see how this goes, but I would like people to drop in some ideas for lessons. So if you're like, I've been looking for a way to teach fractions, right, and make that interactive, I want to know about that in the chat. I'm going to try to do some freestyle, make a little lesson, or at least make an activity, put together some content and some activities in Nearpod so that we can explore around and use that as a way to kind of see how things work. So I'm excited for that. All right, so what you're going to do when you're in this lesson builder is go here to Add Slide. Now you'll notice you can bring some files in. We are going to do that a little bit later, but I just want to start here with adding slides. So essentially what you can do here is build a slide deck out in the same way you would with PowerPoint, in the same way that you would with Google Slides, but you can effectively make almost every single slide in here interactive. Now, there are some exceptions to that I'll show you. But in some ways, that's actually what I like about the lesson builder here versus the Google Slides add-on. If you use the Google Slides add-on, it's just going to push a slide after the slide that you made. And that's basically going to create one static slide, one interactive slide. I would highly suggest that you try to create as many interactive slides as possible. Try to limit the amount of static slides that you have in a lesson. So that's actually what I like about this lesson builder here. Okay, so I'm going to go actually a little bit out of order because some of these won't quite make a lot of sense if I show them in order. So the first one here is the slide option. So slide option is basically like building a Google slide here. So you can create your own opening to a lesson. So I'll just title this one Demo Lesson. And then you can also change the layout. So here, if you wanted, you could make this say 2-element right here. So you could have on one side, for example, an agenda. You could tell students what you're going to do, have an opening for your lesson, main lesson, and a closure. You could then also at the bottom put some learning targets for what students are going to learn. And then you can increase the size of that text. You can add bullet points, things like that if you wanted to. And then you can also bring in some media over here on the other side. So here you could do something like fun, see what they have for a GIF here. Just bring in something silly to start. Okay, so very similar to a Google slide, right? I can just build my own little custom thing here, and then I can also change the way that it would look right there. So that's the basic slide builder. This is good for your intro slides, for including your agenda, learning targets, so that you're framing the lessons in some way, right? Okay, so I'm going to click Save and Exit. And then I'm just going to go through and start mixing some of these content and activity slides. So after something like this, where you've introduced what the lesson is going to be, now we can bring in an activity. So this would be a good time to have some type of introductory activity that you're going to introduce, right? So let's say, for example, that we're going to teach something like the respiratory system. So I might give students instructions to draw what you think the respiratory system looks like as just an intro activity, right? Now you can also add timers to these. So you can go up here to the timer button and you can say that they have 2 minutes, for example, to do this drawing, okay? Now I'm going to show you what these look like in little student previews as well as we go through them. So the first one's pretty obvious. It's just a static slide, but with this second one, now students would have some drawing tools that they could use in order to draw the respiratory system. So you'll see they have drawing tools. There's a highlighter tool. They can add some text and image. So once they get that drawing tool pulled up, they can change the thickness of the pen. They can change the color, things like that. So, you know, they might be drawing a picture of some lungs here or something like that, right? So the more you get to know me, the more you'll know that I'm an absolutely terrible drawer, and I also always like modeling drawing in front of my students for them to be able to see that, right? So, anyways, okay, so these are, you know, lungs, and so if a student could even like label that here, right, and say, okay, those are lungs. Maybe that's what they know up to this point, right? Okay, so now go back to the builder. You could continue after you've done some intro activity to now bring in some content, right? So you'll notice that I'm very loosely here following the 5 E's. I'll talk more explicitly about that when I actually build an actual lesson, not this kind of fake lesson here, but still doing an engage activity, right? Where students are coming in there, engaging with the material. Then I'm going to start to build some knowledge. So that's where it would be good to pull some of these content tools. I'm going to highlight a few. I'm not going to show every single one. There are a few that I really like here. that I would recommend using. One absolutely is the video tool. This is their newest tool. The video tool is essentially an integrated ed puzzle where you can add interactive questions to videos. I'll show what that looks like when I'm building the lesson in a little bit. Web content can be good if you want to have students be able to open up a separate web page in a window that pops up. I like Nearpod 3D, so I'm going to show you that right now, actually. So we can imagine that, we just introduced the respiratory system. We're going to be learning about it. We wanted to see students' visualizations of what that looked like. So now what we're going to do is add a 3D image of the respiratory system. So I'll click on it, click done, and then it's going to bring in an image that students will be able to manipulate, get closer to, zoom in on, move around as they would like. So you can give instructions at this point, right, that students should start to be examining this and trying to, get a better sense of what the respiratory system, the lungs, actually look like, right? Actually, my image wasn't so terrible, right? Okay, so this kind of cool, almost like augmented reality feature here that allows students to make these close observations. So I like this for that type of activity where you could have students match up their conceptualization of something, an object or a place, or they have different animals, things like that, and then actually observe what it is, and then they could try drawing it again. They could also just make observations and then write down what they're noticing, right? So it's just a neat tool that's there for you if you are really trying to build your students' conceptual understanding of some of these more abstract concepts. Okay, so I'll get out of here. Sorry about that. All right, so we've looked at the Draw It tool, we've looked at the 3D tool. A couple of other content tools that I think are really useful. One is the PhET simulation tool. So this is particularly helpful for math science. It's actually only really math science content. So let's say, for example, that we're going to go to a different subject. Let's say you did need to teach students how to do fractions and you were practicing fraction operations. What you can do is bring one of these activities in, and it essentially becomes an interactive activity that students can work on in class. So this is a series of different levels. So we'll just go here to level 1. And essentially this is building students' conceptual understanding, right? So there's no words here describing what to do. You could, of course, give instructions, or part of the point of this is to have students puzzle through this and figure this out. So the way that this works, it's all interactive, right? So they're supposed to be making these mixed numbers, and here it's showing how the different fractions are represented. They can add boxes and then actually make those fractions and then drag it over. So what it's doing here is progressing them through different levels so that they can practice different math skills. And they have these for science labs as well. So definitely useful if you're a math science teacher. All right. Virtual field trips, I also really like. These are going to essentially generate a 360-degree image. And you don't have to have virtual reality headsets to use these. I've actually, whenever I use them, I don't use them with the VR headsets. I just have students look at them with the image that's on the screen. So let's say, for example, that you're teaching Egypt and you're teaching Great Pyramids. You could bring in that 360-degree image, and then they'll be able to essentially drag it around. They can look at that place, right? So it's basically like Google Earth Street View, where they can check stuff out. And then if they did have virtual reality headsets, they could check that out as well. And obviously that's going to work if students have access to a smartphone. They're accessing Nearpod on a smartphone, but that will make it even a little bit cooler. Okay, so that's the VR experience, and that's good for, again, making observations, so kind of similar to Nearpod 3D there, right? Okay, so let's say that we did just have students go do maybe the 3D, or they just went on a virtual reality headset. It would be a good time to have some activity after that where they're coming back and they are sharing what it is that they just observed. So now we want them to say, okay, you just checked out the pyramids of Giza, or you just checked out the respiratory system. What did you see? So a good tool for that would be this Collaborate board. The Collaborate board is basically, if the video is the Edpuzzle integration, the Collaborate board is the Padlet tool that they've integrated into Nearpod. So it's not nearly as powerful as Padlet. It's just a text-based, and you can have some images in here, but mostly text, bulletin board where students can post responses. So they could post observations. You can write a description down below, change the background type if you wanted, click save, and here when we go to preview again, what that's going to allow students to do, just like Padlet, if you're familiar with it, is essentially, sorry about that, let's go here, add a little sticky note down below, I noticed, and post it. Again, here they could put a little image, click post, that will show up. And you, as the teacher, I'm going to show what this looks like actually running it teacher student view. You can control if you want to be able to moderate these as they're coming through as well. So similar to Padlet in that sense. So these will be seen. This is one of the only ways, or the best, most effective way to have students see each other's answers. These boards can be done asynchronously as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be live. So it is a good way to have students sharing work with each other and see each other's responses. All right, so now I want to show the BBC video content tool it's okay. I liked it before they came up with before they brought in the interactive video tool. It's basically just going to bring in some videos from BBC that are not interactive. So not as effective anymore. So I wouldn't, this one, it's fine, but not anything particularly special. The Sway integration is kind of cool. So these are basically just going to be informative pamphlets, like digital pamphlets of information. So again, let's say, for example, here that we were teaching about something like climate change, you could add the Sway. And then when we preview it, you'll see that it's going to have some images. It's going to have some key ideas about this concept. So it's just providing some visual reinforcement, some key pieces of information about that concept. And climate is misspelled there. Okay. And just giving some bullet pointed pieces of information. So this can be good for quick reviews, for just getting some key pieces of information to students in a more interesting way than just, say, asking them to read a PDF or something like that. So of the content slides, those I think are the most powerful and unique. The slideshow is just going to be a series of pictures. That's great. I think totally use them, but it's just a series of pictures. Audio is going to allow you to bring in an audio file. PDF viewer will allow you to upload a PDF. Now, I actually think there's a better way of being able to bring in PDFs as long as they're single document PDFs, so that you can actually make them interactive. And that is by using the drawing tool. But rather than just writing a description and saying that students should draw a picture, what we'll say is annotate. So we could do something like annotate. I'm misspelling this. Annotate. What is wrong with me? Okay, here we go. Okay. Annotate the text for unknown words. All right. Also, the thing I can never do is spell and type and talk and do that in front of students. I'm always, you misspelled that, Mr. Carey. I love hearing that from students. It's my favorite thing. Okay, so annotate the text for unknown words. Then what you can do is go to upload background image. And let's say you have a PDF file, you can bring that in. So you can bring it in from lots of different places. I'm just going to bring one in here from my computer. And actually going to show how I build a lesson around this later, this particular text. But you can bring that in now and then click Save. And just like students were able to draw with the draw tool and draw, their depiction of the respiratory system, now they can also draw over the text. So they can use a highlight tool. They can annotate for unknown words. So obviously, you want to be a little bit more explicit about what you're looking for here, but you could have them identify some unknown words, and they could even potentially make inferences about what they think those words mean with the little text box tool over here. So this, I think this means. So this tool, the draw it tool, in my opinion, is the better way to bring in text. Of course, you're not going to be able to bring in multi-page text in a single draw it, but you could just replicate the text over and over. So let's say you did have 2 pages of text or 3 pages of text that you wanted students to write on. You could just stack 3 draw it's in a row. So if you are bringing in text, I would highly recommend that you're not just asking students to read passively. You are bringing in text via the drawing tool so that they're able to actually, mark it up. So this is definitely one of the more powerful features in Nearpod. All right, let's look at a couple other activities. Time to climb, I'm going to show you when I build the other lesson, so I'm going to hold off on that. Matching pairs is also a lesson or also an activities tool that can be useful. So here, what you could do is, let's say you were teaching some vocabulary and you were teaching agriculture. Then what you could do is search for a picture of agriculture, farming, pull that in, and that's going to create a pair. So I'll make another one here, right, so that it is a little bit more obvious what I'm doing. So let's see, we'll do something like, just off the top of my head, oceans. Let's say we're studying geography, and pull that in for the image, click Save, and done. Okay, now when I click Preview, what a student will do, and you can imagine, let's say that we've made a lot of these, right? We have different geographic concepts that we want to match the word to the image, then students would match those around, right? It doesn't look all that complex because I only had 4 there, but it would be if you had more of them. So this can be good for reviewing vocabulary after students have maybe read a passage like we showed with the drawing tool. Okay. Let's go back here to activities. And another one that I want to show, because I'm not going to show this when I build the other lesson, is the FlipGrid integration. So you can also have students respond via video in FlipGrid and then be able to respond to each other with this FlipGrid integration. So the way that it works is that if you click on it, it's just going to ask you to essentially include the link from FlipGrid. So you would have to still make the lesson here in FlipGrid. You'd have to create the topic that you wanted students to respond to. Then you'd have to get these links and you'd have to put them in here, okay? So once you do that, what it's going to do is create the FlipGrid within Nearpod so that students would be able to access it immediately. So also a useful tool for getting students to engage and interact. Let's see if pull this whole thing up here. Okay. So when we add that and preview it, you'll see that it's just going to essentially take students to the Nearpod interface when they get to that slide. But rather than having to link manage and jump over to FlipGrid, it's just right here for them. So that is, of course, another huge benefit. I mentioned a lot of other programs that Nearpod kind of emulates, like Edpuzzle, Padlet. Rather than having to have students jump over to all these other websites, it's all here in essentially a self-contained HyperDoc, right? So that's a big plus for why it would be great to use, especially for younger students. Okay, so these next few I'm going to show when I'm actually building a lesson here. So what I'm going to do right now is take a look at some of the questions and see what some of these questions are. So one is whether or not the gold version is worth it. This is Alan. Thanks for your question. Yeah, so my whole take on whether or not you should pay for programs is that you should give something the full trial run first. So don't pay for anything until you feel the pain of why you would want to pay for it, if that makes sense. So you're, trucking along using Nearpod, and suddenly you realize, I don't have enough storage and I don't want to delete those lessons. Then it might be time to upgrade. I personally would not upgrade it just to access the add-on. You can just build lessons in here without the add-on. So I don't think that's a reason alone. I would base it on whether or not you're using it a lot and really feel like you need it. Okay. Yeah, and Cynthia's mentioning using Time to Climb, which is gamified quizzes. And that's something that I'm going to show in the lesson that I'm going to build in a minute. All right. Okay, I know there's a lot of other questions, and I'm going to get to some of these questions at the end as well. But what I want to show right now is how to actually build a logical lesson. So what I did right here is just kind of slap some different stuff together, right? And it's not all that meaningful. The trick when you're using the internal lesson builder is that you actually have to put something together that makes logical sense. So what I want to show here is how you can build a custom lesson in Nearpod, and we're going to do it by building a lesson following the 5E sequence. So I'm just going to start over here, and what I'm going to do, and again, if I have time at the end, I will try to do some lessons. I mentioned this in the beginning that I'm going to try to do some lessons that I just do on the fly. So if you have some of those in mind as I'm watching, keep those in mind and drop those into the chat. But what I'm going to do right now is build a ELA lesson around the skill of identifying character traits. And we're going to have students identify character traits based on direct characterization and indirect characterization. And so what I'm going to do here is build a lesson that would essentially take students through the entire 5E sequence. So we're going to have an engage portion. We're going to have students explore, explain, elaborate, and then there's going to be an evaluation piece at the end. And I'm sure I'm anticipating the question of how long I think this lesson would take. We'll have to see. Interesting what people think. My guess is this lesson that I'm going to build probably would take place over a couple days. That does also get to a point that you can build a lesson and set it up as a live lesson and then have students come in, finish part of it, and then you can relaunch it to launch it at the same place so that you don't lose where you were. Okay, so we're going to do ELA lesson here. And I'm going to change the layout. Just like I did in the last one, I'm going to start here with the agenda. So what I'll do is, and I'm going to write for you. This is a little bit less student facing, but I want you to see what I'm planning as far as how I'm going to build this lesson. So we're going to start here with engage. And for the engage, we're going to use the collaborate board. And then after the engage, we're going to we're going to stay and engage, and we're going to do some, explain, sorry. And we're going to watch an interactive video. So we'll watch that interactive video to learn a little bit about what characterization is and how to identify indirect or indirect characterization. Then we will, I'm off right now. Explore, not explain, explore, my apologies. Okay, then for the explain phase, we're gonna bring in the fill in the blanks, okay? We're going to continue with explain. Fill in the blanks is relatively low rigor. We're going to up the rigor a little bit. We'll bring in a PDF, draw it here. And then for the elaborate, we'll increase the rigor, have students actually apply their learning. What we'll do here is have them use the open-ended question, and we'll have them create something. And then for evaluate, we'll play the time to climb, which is the quiz game. Okay. And our main objective here, or main learning target, is that students will be able to, we want them to define and apply and identify direct and indirect characterization. Okay, so I'll size this, a little bit more the way that I want to, again, as though I were designing a Google slide. I'll bring in something, I like the GIF, so I'll bring that in. Let's do, we did fun last time, I'll do awesome this time. See what we got here. Okay, just for a little fun. And we can change the style there. And now I have the opening slide. Okay, so what we're going to do to start is bring in a collaborate board. So collaborate boards are pretty good for lesson openings. Again, if you're using Padlet, you're familiar with this format of having students essentially post on a board. And for this one, you could ask a direct question like, what do you already know about characterization? That's a little bit boring, I think. So instead, I'm going to have students start to apply the skill without kind of naming the skill yet. So I'm going to ask them, what are some characteristics of a person you admire? And then in the description to get more in, I'm going to also ask them to write, how do you know that that person has those characteristics, right? And then we'll save that. Then to actually start to get students to norm and learn about characterization, I'm going to go here to add slide. I'm going to bring in a video. And here you have lots of different options. So this is the interactive video feature. They have added a ton of content, pre-made content with pre-made questions in Nearpod. And I would suggest checking this out, seeing what they already have here. It's already vetted, high quality. It's not just randomly searching on YouTube. You can also pull in videos from YouTube. You can even pull in your own videos. So you could upload a video. Let's say you had your own tutorial that you made in Loom, Screencastify, you download it. You could bring it in and add interactive questions to it. But what I'm going to do here is just go to ELA, and I'm going to search for the skill. And I think you'll find if you search for the different skills that you're working on, there's quite a bit of content out there that relates to it. So if you want to check it out, you can click on it. That will pull up the video, and you'll see on all the video content that they have that they already have these interactive questions. Now, if you want to change it, right, how much do you already know about characters? A lot, little, or not much. You could keep it or you could change that. It's up to you. You could edit it there. And then you can also add your own. So as the video is playing, what you can do is, let's mute this, add an activity. So I would, right now this video doesn't really have questions that are targeted in the way that I want them to be targeted because they're not asking students about direct and indirect characterization yet. So what I would do is I would find those places in the video where it talks about the skill that I'm trying to apply. So right here, she's talking about direct characterization, and then you can add an activity. So here you could add a question, and you could either do open-ended or multiple choice. And here you could ask them just a check for understanding. What is direct characterization? Save it. And then I would repeat that process as you're going through and really identifying the specific skills that you want students to be able to identify. So now we're talking about indirect characterization, so I could add another interactive question about that. Okay, so once you're ready, click Save. And then what I'm going to do is think about that video, think about the information that students just learned, and I'm going to bring in a fill in the blank activity here. So what fill in the blank will allow you to do is type a text or paste it. So if you already had a text written, which is actually what I should have done here, obviously, is that you can bring it in, and then you'll see you'll be able to basically select from that text keywords that you want students to be able to identify. So we could say, for example, let's say that there were a couple of key concepts like indirect characterization is when the author shows a character's traits, and direct characterization is when the author tells us a character's traits. Now, you might want to have this be longer, right? So you probably before that even want to have something about character traits. The idea here is that I am identifying key points from that video that I just played that I want to review as a check for understanding to see whether or not students are understanding this key idea. You can do things here like change the font type just for aesthetic purposes. Okay, so then what you can do is click on the word. So I know that I want students to be able to identify indirect, for example. And let's say I also want students to be able to identify this word, trait. So I'm going to click on that as well. I'll click on direct, and we can also click on tells, for example. Let's do shows too. So if students were able to put those in the right place, then we would, so that's probably going to be confusing. So let's take that one off. Okay. Then we would get a sense of whether or not they were understanding it, right? Okay, so that's kind of like the lower rigor, more surface level application of understanding. And I'll show you again what this is going to look like when we actually teach it. Then I want to build up the rigor a little bit more. So I'll go here again to add slide. I'm going to go to activities, and we're going to go to draw it. And I'm going to bring that same text in. So here I want students to identify one example of direct characterization and identify one example of indirect characterization. And you could tell them something like circle direct characterization and underline the indirect characterization and write the trait you think it shows. Okay, so that we're actually having them apply, not just circle something on a page. Then I'm going to bring in that same image that I showed as my background image here. So I have my single page text. Again, if you wanted to bring in multiple, you could just stack this and do 2 of these drafts in a row. Again, here I'm going to add that timer up to the top and tell students that we have 5 minutes, for example, to do this. Add it. Okay. So you can see that I'm progressing the application of the skill. It's becoming more rigorous as we're progressing through the lesson. So now what I'm going to do for the elaborate phase, when students really have to apply what they've learned, I'm going to add the open-ended question here. And I'll ask students to write a 1 to 2 paragraph story about a person they admire, could be made up or real, and give them some instructions. You must use direct characterization and indirect characterization. And you could even have students mark their own text. So you could say, put in parentheses direct characterization or indirect after each example, so that they have to point out where they did that, right, in the text. Now you can add media, video instructions here. So if you wanted, you could add some instructional piece if you wanted to really explain that differently. You could also, it might not work as well with this here, but if you wanted to, you could enable student audio recordings. I'll just enable it so I can show you what it looks like when I pull up the student account. This would be potentially an accommodation or a scaffold that would allow for some differentiation, so students could also audio record their response. Okay, so I'll click save, and then I'm going to close this lesson out with an evaluation. So I'll go here to add slide. Now you could do the regular quiz tool for an evaluation, which is going to be kind of regular old quiz, which is fine. I would recommend you do time to climb instead. It's a competition unless you don't want it to be a competition. If you do time to climb, it's basically just a fun game where students are going to compete a little bit against each other. So here you can make your own questions. You could say, for example, an author says something like Joe is tall, and, then they have to answer direct characterization or indirect characterization. By the way, the answer is direct characterization here if you're not an ELA person. And you could add more answers if you wanted to. You probably which example of characterization is it? And you could just add some evaluation questions here, right? So we continue to add some questions. Question 2 would be, Joe had tears running down his face. What can we logically infer about Joe? So this is more applying some understanding about indirect characterization, right? So it could be potentially that, he he was sad, right? He was hungry. Okay, so you get the idea that you can write your own custom questions that would be applying the knowledge that they learned, and you can continue to just add questions, add answer choices if you want. So I'll do a couple here just so you can see. Question, choose this one. Wrong. Okay, just so you can see what it looks like when we make it. Okay, so now that we have created the lesson, oops, let's get rid of that. I'm going to show you how you can run this live with students. So we'll go here to save and exit. This is our characterization lesson. And you could run this asynchronously. I really like Nearpod though for live lessons. So you're in Google Meet, you're in Zoom, you have students open up the link that you're going to share with them, and you have them pull that over to half their screen. And then on the other half of the screen, you can still have them watching your live feed through Zoom, through Google Meet. You can choose whether or not you want to share your screen with them, or if you just want to show yourself, right, on that screen so that they can see you talking, see their other classmates there, and then just be doing their work on the other one. So what you'll do is set this up by going here to live participation, and then you will get some different options for how you could share it. You can, very easy way is to just grab the link here. Quick tour. I don't need a tour here. Okay, let's roll. All right, so, oops, I did not get the link. Sorry, I messed up. That's okay. So we have the code. We'll do it that way instead. And what I'm going to do is grab a student browser and I'll pull this one over. So I would recommend having having students set it up this way as well, so that they have this side-by-side screen here. So this is one way to do it. Students can just go and then they can enter the code. So you can see the code up here on the side, NGCD5. Student can come in and then they're going to enter their name. So do demo student, join lesson. And I'm going to see on my screen that students are coming in. And you're going to start to see the roster of students as they're coming through. The code will always be up here, so you can always share the code with students if they come in late. Now, you'll see that the screen is fixed essentially on the student slide. So if I'm clicking on this one, I'm not able to advance the slide as long as it's in live mode here as the student. And get rid of that. And I'm in full control, right, as the teacher. So as I'm advancing through the slides, once the interactive features come up, then I'll have some different options. So for this one, for example, I can approve or choose whether or not I want to approve student answers as they're coming in. So here, as a student is writing, so Jerry Rice, he's my childhood hero, so we'll do that. And post. Now, you'll notice it does not show up yet, so I would have to approve it just by clicking there, and then those answers will start to show up. So that's very similar to Padlet. Now, the video feature, I would recommend that you set this up so that it's on this device only. So what that's going to do is make you in control of the pace of the video. So if you click this device only, it's going to pop up this little message over here that says eyes up front. You'll play the video. Turn the sound down. And when they get to that question, okay, it's going to pop up right here. Okay. How much do you already know about characters? A lot, a little. Okay. Oh, hey, we have somebody else jumped in. Hi, Sarah. Feel free to answer questions. Okay. Person, got in, the answer is submitted, and then I can immediately see it pop up. Now, another benefit of this is that what I can do is click share with the class. So let's say I'm like, demo student, that's an amazing answer. Everybody needs to see. Then it's going to pop that up for the rest of the class to see. So it can still be a way to just pop over and share student answers with the rest of the class. Okay, so we're starting to build our knowledge, engaging a little bit with the material. Now, students have just learned, They've explored, they have supposedly learned what indirect, direct characterization is. Now we're going to have them do some basic fill in the blanks. So now they're going to drag. So they'll click those, and what they can do is bring them in. So they have direct characterization is when the author shows the character's traits, and indirect characterization is when, it's like that, sorry. And direct is when author tells us. There we go. Okay, all right. I learned that. All right, okay. So now it'll tell the student 4 out of 4. I will also be able to see who got what and what their score was as they're coming through. So it's just an immediate formative assessment check so that I can see what's happening, and I can get more detail here if I want to go to view answers by actually seeing what students did for that particular part of the lesson. Okay, so now what students are going to do is draw it, So this is a timed activity. So I have the ability here to start the activity and control when it pops up on the student screen. So when I click start activity, now students are applying this skill, So they have to identify an example of direct characterization. Obviously, I didn't give them enough time here. And indirect, circle, underline, write the trait they think it shows. So, we have a student here. Let's see, make it nice and thin. So we're going to do circle direct characterization. So even right here, right? Large woman. Okay. And then we're asking students, right, to write what they think it shows. So as students are going through it, they're circling, they're underlining, and let's see, that's something that a student says. So then the student might infer that the character trait of this particular character, just based on the way he is talking, is that he is respectful. Okay, so then when the student is ready, they would click submit. And you'll notice here that as the teacher, I'm basically able to see this entire workspace, so I can see what students are doing. And I can observe, I can click on it. So if I want to, see, hey, what's Sarah doing there, right? I can get a better sense of what she is working on, okay? So also pretty powerful in that you can see in real time what students are doing, and you could be giving them some feedback as well. You can't like draw on theirs now, but what you can do is talk to them, right? So if you had the chat open, you could give them, a comment, and then you can also share these, just like I shared the other answers. You can share these back with the class. So you can hit the share button, and that's just going to pop that answer up for others. So you could use this as a jumping off place to have a conversation, to talk about, fixing mistakes or ideal responses here as well. Okay. All right, now we're going to have students apply the knowledge I'm not going to allow that for now, but in a deeper way. So this is where they're going to write. So, again, I'll say this is my story. And once they submit, and remember, I did allow that option to record audio, so they could hypothetically record this as well. They'll click submit. I'll start to see their answers coming through. Just like with the others, I could share this with the class. Okay, so this is our deeper for our elaborate phase, where they're actually getting in and they're applying knowledge in that deeper way. And so I can also see Sarah's here, right, as it's coming through live. Okay. This last piece is that evaluate piece, where we're going to play a gamified quiz. And here, you can select different themes. I'm going to turn off the sound just because it's a little bit loud. They can choose a little character. And so what's going to happen is this character basically is going to be climbing to the finish line. As other students come in, like Sarah, if you want to join, then you'll see those other characters pop up, and then it's going to be a race up to the top. So right now I only have my one student in, but if we had multiple students in, we would see them all jumping in with a little avatar like, hey, there we go. And then I'll click start, and there'll be a little timer countdown. Students can answer the questions, and then you'll see as the student is answering that they're going to be moving up the hill. So that's just a fun way to bring in a little bit gamification in a similar way that you would with quizzes or Kahoot, rather than just having it be a regular old quiz. Don't think if you teach upper level students that they don't want this. They do. Believe me, even adults want this. So it's just much more fun than doing a regular old bland quiz to have a little game like this. So recommend that you check this out. It doesn't have to be high stakes. It can just be a way to see what students know as an informal, formative assessment at the end. So you can see here that there's also a leaderboard, right? So students can be the winner, and it's just a fun way to mix things up. Okay, so I know I promised, sorry, that I was going to do a little riff, a little freestyle, FlipGrid freestyle, that I ran out of time today. I wasn't quite sure this was going to take me so long, but I promise I will do something like that in the future, where you can just drop in some lesson ideas and I will try to do that on the fly. Maybe I'll make a whole show out of that. That would be fun. Okay, so I'm gonna check out some of the questions that are in here to see what questions people have. So, okay, Karen asked whether or not this is the free or the paid version. This is the free version. I literally just created this account in Nearpod. The limitation with the free version is that you will have limits in terms of your storage space. So, particularly once you start bringing in videos, you're going to notice that that takes up a lot of space, especially if you're trying to bring in your own videos that you make and upload them and add interactive questions to them. That's going to eat up a lot of space pretty quickly. They've also just made the add-on a paid feature, so you would not be able to access the Google Slides add-on with the free version. Okay. Yeah, there's something here about Padlet. How to add questions. Okay, so first, Padlet. So yes, um, there is an embedded Padlet tool. That's the Collaborate board tool. It's just not nearly as powerful as Padlet. So that actually gets to another point that I wanted to make. So I love Nearpod. I think Nearpod should be a part of everybody's toolkit. It has clearly lots of dynamic features to it, but there are other tools as well that I would consider bringing in, and Padlet is one of them. I absolutely love Padlet. It's much more powerful than the Collaborate board here. It also can be a very powerful interactive workspace. But what's great about Nearpod is that it can help you develop the skill to be able to put together lessons, put together interactive lessons. As you build your skill, then what you can do is start building your own custom hyperdocs. You can even build custom hyperdocs that link out to a lesson like this. So you could still build something in Google Slides and then just link to a Nearpod lesson within it if you want students to explore some content there. So other tools like Padlet that some people are mentioning, absolutely, I love them. And in some ways, I consider them just a slight step up in terms of difficulty for you and students, only because there's a little bit more link management involved and it's not all housed in one place. So Nearpod can be a good stepping stone to just piecing together all of your own programs. But there's also an argument to be made for just having everything in one place. Carol's asking whether or not it's user-friendly for K to third grade. Absolutely. Unfortunately, the immersive reader integration with Nearpod is also only available with the paid version, but immersive reader will read everything back to students. So you can have a little audio file on there, and students don't need to know how to read yet and to be able to use it. So what I would recommend that you do is go to the Nearpod library, check out the pre-made lessons that have been made already in Nearpod, because they have a lot of great examples of K through third lessons that you can do. And I've worked with teachers who build Nearpod lessons to teach students how to read, for example, and do sight words. So you can absolutely do that in Nearpod. Okay, I know I'm out of time. There are lots of questions. I'm going to stay in the chat as the end screen it comes up and answer some questions. So I went a little bit longer than I anticipated. Just mention a couple things again that I mentioned in the beginning. One is just a reminder that I'm having live shows now at 4 p.m. on Thursdays. I will be off for 2 weeks for the holiday break, so wish everybody a wonderful holiday. I mentioned at the beginning of the show a lot of exciting shows that I have planned right after the break, so definitely come back for those. Also hosting an all-day workshop with the amazing educators over at Marco Learning on January 16th that we put together to essentially custom answer all the big questions that we've heard coming up, like how to run online science labs, how to get kids to engage in Zoom conversations, how to make learning more rigorous when you're doing online learning, how to make lessons interactive, get 100% participation. So we plan a workshop for a whole day just to address all those questions. If you're interested in that, check it out. There's a link in the video description. And lastly, if you're a teacher or school leader and you're looking for additional support with how to integrate technology in your classroom or your school, I'd love to talk with you about that. I have a link to my calendar in the video description below as well that you could check out. And as always, if you have any suggestions for any topics that you want me to cover, that could be subject areas or programs or just how to do particular things with technology, please let me know so that I can create a live show around that, because I definitely want to make these helpful. So I will stick around in the chat a little bit to try to answer some of these other questions that have come up. And thanks so much for coming tonight, everybody.